Seeing his son Theo's bright yellow jacket out in the sea, Pete Riley panics and rushes into the water. He desperately calls out for the boy, but all that answers him is the sound of the waves. 3 months earlier, Pete Riley and Maddie Wilson are the happy parents of their young son Theo, but lately the family has been struggling financially. They live in a small seaside town. One day Maddie, who runs her own restaurant, gets a troubling phone call and heads straight to the hospital, as does Pete. Both of them are baffled as to why they were summoned and forced to leave work in the middle of the day. The chief physician says there is reason to believe that Theo is not their son. Theo and another boy were switched at the maternity ward. Hearing this, the couple is completely stunned. The hospital administration insists on a DNA test to determine the degree of kinship for certain. If they refuse, the other family may go to court and force the issue. One way or another, a thorough investigation will be carried out. At home, Pete and Maddie try to process the fact that they may not be Theo's biological parents. Pete refuses to believe it, convinced that someone has simply made a massive mistake. Maddie hopes so too, but at the same time she cannot stop thinking about the worst-case scenario. What will they do if that turns out to be true? Pete does not even want to consider that possibility. He does not care what the DNA test says, because Theo will still be their son. That same day a man appears on their doorstep and introduces himself as Miles Lambert, the other father. He is here to talk everything through calmly. Pete does not like it, but he still lets Miles come inside. It turns out that a few weeks earlier, the Lambert's son David had undergone genetic testing because the boy was slightly behind in his development. That is how they found out he was not related to the Lamberts at all. Now Miles and his wife Lucy are trying to understand how this could have happened. The man shows Maddie and Pete a photo of David, possibly of their biological son. Miles also suggests that they all meet together so they can get to know the boys better. Pete, however, would rather not rush things and wants to wait for the DNA test results first. They are still in shock. Miles asks for a photo of Theo to show Lucy, but Pete refuses to give him one. In a single instant, their entire lives have been turned upside down. Soon the couple receives the DNA test results, a 0% match. They have no choice but to visit the Lamberts, who live in a large house. Miles and Lucy welcome the people with whom they have become connected by chance, or perhaps by someone else's mistake. The couple finally meets Theo, their biological son. Maddie remembers seeing Lucy in the maternity ward. Their sons were the only 2 babies born prematurely and in need of extra care. David is asleep at the moment, so the Lamberts give their guests a brief tour of the house. Lucy used to be an artist, but after her child was born she devoted herself entirely to motherhood. While Lucy goes to wake David so his biological parents can meet him, Miles watches Theo with the other family, a look of envy in his eyes. Pete and Maddie do not have a luxurious house like the Lamberts, but they have always done everything they could to be good parents to their child. The first time Maddie sees David, she cannot hold back her emotions. While the two couples talk, the boys will be looked after by the Lamberts' nanny, Tanya. Miles says he admires the way Maddie manages to balance work and motherhood. She says that fortunately Pete took over childcare completely and left his job as a journalist. Recently when Theo started preschool, Pete got a job as a gardener to earn a little extra money. Every last penny they have goes into their restaurant. Maddie says outright that she cannot stand small talk and suggests they get to the point. Both couples agree that everything will stay as it is, but they think it would be nice if the boys spent time together. They could be like brothers. However, that is not all. Miles suggests suing the hospital to prevent cases like this in the future. The Lamberts do not need the money, so if they win, Pete and Maddie can keep the entire compensation. They promise to think about it. Now that everything has been clarified, everyone involved in the story feels relieved. From that point on, the two families begin spending time together. Miles and Pete even go surfing together. The men seem to have gotten along very well. Miles thinks it would be wonderful for all of them to spend the weekend with Lucy's relatives in Norfolk. Besides, her family wants to meet Theo. Pete promises to discuss it with Maddie. Meanwhile, the women go for a walk with Theo. Lucy says she is terribly sorry they could not bring David with them, since the boy often needs to be by himself. And although Pete has fully accepted the situation, Maddie cannot stop thinking about it. Their life has split into before and after, even if they are trying to pretend that everything is fine. Soon Pete gets some great news. His father has found a job, so things will be a little easier for them. Suddenly Maddie is distracted by a call from work, and at that very moment Theo gets hold of a bottle of pills. The couple rushes their son to the hospital. Fortunately everything turns out fine, but the hospital is required to report the incident to social services. The couple decides not to tell the Lamberts about it. Miles appears at their house uninvited at a very inconvenient moment and gives Theo a bicycle. The man is clearly using every opportunity he can to see his biological son again, and this is starting to make Maddie increasingly uneasy. She does not like that her husband never told her about the trip to Norfolk. Maddie would very much like to see David, but Lucy keeps finding excuses not to bring the boy along. That is why Maddie has no intention of spending the weekend with strangers. They do not know that Miles is ready to do anything to get his biological son back. The next day Pete gets a call from Theo's preschool. He pushed another boy, so one of his parents will have to come pick him up for the day. Pete cannot leave work for long, and Maddie, busy at the restaurant, is not answering his calls, so he has no choice but to ask the Lamberts to look after Theo. Late that evening, Pete comes to pick up his son. Lucy says she would rather not wake the boys, because they are sleeping so sweetly. Pete hints to Lucy that it would be nice if Maddie could spend some time with David. He assures the woman that they have no intention of taking David away. The Lamberts suggest that Theo stay the night and that Tanya become a shared nanny for the boys, that way they will be able to grow closer. Of course they will not charge anything for the nanny's services. Before Pete can respond, Miles says that he has read Pete's book, which he wrote after Maddie gave birth and struggled with her new role. The book never became popular, which according to Miles, is completely undeserved. Pete could publish an article about their astonishing story of the babies being switched at the maternity ward. Maddie is growing more and more uneasy about everything that is happening, while Pete thinks there is nothing wrong with the boys becoming closer. The Lamberts surely mean well. When Maddie learns that Pete never told them about Norfolk, she cannot help feeling angry. She does not trust these people. Maddie remembers talking to Lucy in the neonatal intensive care unit. The prognosis for Maddie's son had been extremely poor. All she could do was wait. Maddie cannot take it anymore and breaks down. She goes to the beach. Ollie, the chef at the restaurant, follows her. Miles watches Ollie hug Maddie. That same evening Miles appears on their doorstep with yet another gift for Theo. He also insists on seeing the boy. Maddie refuses as politely as possible, explaining that Theo is already asleep. At that moment Miles mentions that he saw Maddie on the beach earlier that day with a tall guy with dreadlocks. Pete realizes he is talking about Ollie. Maddie decides to say then and there that they will not be going to Norfolk. Pete's sister Emma is supposedly coming with her children. Before leaving, Miles asks them to provide Stella's contact information, the nurse who looked after Theo. The Lamberts will not back down until they get justice in court. Pete and Maddie meet at the restaurant for dinner with their family friend Jen and her girlfriend Maya. Suddenly they notice the Lamberts, who it turns out never left for Norfolk after all. Pete and Maddie ask Jen to pretend to be Emma, Pete's sister. The Lamberts join their table. Miles immediately sees through the lie, because he has already seen Jen on the beach with Pete. He tries to explain himself so as not to ruin the relationship completely, while Maddie states outright that they did not want to go to Norfolk. They were under no obligation to do so. Be that as it may, the relationship between the two families is now hopelessly damaged. Maddie feels no guilt and has no intention of apologizing. Maybe it is not too late, and they can still go back to living as they did before. However, everything finally falls apart when they receive a court summons. The Lamberts intend to seek custody of both boys. What is more, they filed the claim 8 weeks earlier, which means they had been lying from the very beginning. It turns out that a court-approved doctor came to the Lamberts' house and took Theo's DNA sample right when the boy was spending the night with them. The nanny helped them do it. The lawyer advises Pete and Maddie to reach an agreement with the Lamberts, because they have the money and the means to win this case. Miles shows up uninvited again and declares that from now on, Theo will be spending his days with them. Pete and Maddie make it clear that they will not allow that. Miles does not like it, and he promises that they will meet in court, especially since Theo has already become attached to his new family. Maddie is so overwhelmed by stress that she is unable to focus on work. Ollie cannot help noticing. And although he does not know the full situation, he supports Maddie in every way he can. She takes Theo to the pool and sees Lucy there with David. Maddie tries to speak to her, but Lucy hurries away, saying that they will discuss everything at mediation. In truth, all of this is incredibly hard for Lucy as well. During mediation, an attempt to reach an agreement with the help of a neutral third party, both sides speak about how lost they were when they found out that all this time they had been raising children who were not their biological sons. The Lamberts say that they would like both boys to live with them as brothers, while Maddie and Pete think it would be reasonable for everything to remain as it is, with David spending one night a week at their house. Miles is clearly unhappy with this, and he mentions that Theo was recently taken to the hospital, which attracted the attention of social services. Miles insists that Theo's biological parents pose a threat to him. The fact that Maddie went through postnatal depression will also work against them. No matter what Pete and Maddie say, Miles twists everything to his own advantage. He keeps insisting that these people are not even able to provide properly for one child, let alone periodically take David in as well. After the mediation, Pete loses control and lunges at Miles, who of course had been trying to provoke exactly that. Later, this along with many other little things that had seemed insignificant at first glance, will end up in the case file. David's biological parents are only allowed to see him in the presence of Lucy or Miles. Maddie goes to these visits alone. She is determined to fight for both boys in court, while Pete believes that first and foremost they should be thinking about Theo, not David. For the sake of his family, Pete gave up his career, and he cannot afford to lose what they have. Maddie understands that. She only wants Pete to admit that he has another son. He promises to try. Pete visits his father, John, who has been having health problems. John is not yet ready to meet his newfound grandson, at least not until they sort everything out. Pete does decide to build a connection with David as well, and that very first meeting melts his heart. The Lamberts, by the way, have set up a charity foundation named after David, intended to help premature babies. When it is time to leave, Pete feels a pain that is hard to put into words. Maddie thinks they should go to the Lamberts charity event. After all, those people are using David to show everyone what wonderful parents they are. Pete agrees. He also agrees to fight for both children in court. The first thing they plan to do is sue the hospital and get compensation, otherwise they simply will not have enough money for 2 legal cases. Stella, the nurse from the maternity ward, meets with Pete to tell him that she has been suspended since the investigation began. Everything looks as though the hospital management wants to pin all the blame on the junior staff, claiming that they failed to put identification tags on the newborns. But Stella knows for certain that this is not true. She is a good nurse and has always carried out her duties conscientiously. Pete would like to help her, but he is completely confused. The lawyer the couple has hired asks them to recall the details of the boy's birth. Pete says the delivery was difficult. The doctors even said that their son might not survive. When asked whether the nurse put a tag on him, Pete answers that he thinks she did. But if that really was the case, then the boys must have been switched immediately after they were transferred to intensive care. Pete suggests that the tag may have slipped off. At home, however, Maddie finds a photo of Theo from intensive care, and it is clear that the boy is not wearing a tag. She tells Pete that right now they need to stand together and protect their sons, not think about how much they owe the staff. Yes, the medical team nursed both boys through a critical condition, but that does not change the fact that they made a fatal mistake. Miles gives all his attention to Theo, as if he has forgotten about David. Lucy sees this and does not know what to feel. Theo has started calling Miles his second dad, which cannot help but worry Pete. Clearly Miles is manipulating the boy. That same day Pete gets a call from a newspaper offering to publish an article. The man is baffled because he never submitted any article. There is no doubt whose doing this is, but Miles ignores his calls. The couple attends the Lamberts charity reception, where the hosts behave with exaggerated friendliness. Pete tries to speak to Miles about the article, but he avoids the conversation at every turn. While Maddie orders a strong drink, Pete learns in the course of speaking with one of the guests that the Lamberts are planning to open a restaurant near the bay. Meanwhile, Miles gives a speech, thanking everyone who came to support their David Foundation for premature babies. Pete whispers to Maddie about the restaurant. Miles invites his wife onto the stage and gives her the floor. Lucy speaks emotionally about how the birth of her beloved son David changed her life. She used to be an artist, and a very successful one at that, and she never imagined she would give up her ambitions for motherhood. Maddie finds it unbearable to listen to, but does her best to hold herself together. Under the influence of alcohol, she loudly accuses Miles of stealing someone else's child. But that only works in Miles's favor, because it gives him yet another reason to discredit Theo's parents in court. Pete says that they intend to fight for both children. The next day, Detective Ridley and Detective Chopra, who are leading the investigation into Theo Lambert's abduction from St. Alexander's Hospital, appear on the couple's doorstep. They take Pete to the station for questioning. Now it is clear just how far the Lamberts, or rather Miles, are willing to go. Pete is suspected of deliberately switching the babies. Of course he denies it. At the time, with his son in critical condition, Pete was in no state to think straight. The detective suggests that Pete may have decided to swap his son for a healthier baby. Realizing where the case is heading, Pete's lawyer, Annika Chowdhury, cuts the questioning short. Later, she explains to the couple that this is the Lamberts' response to the lawsuit. One way or another, it is already too late to back down. Maddie asks Pete outright whether he was the one who switched the babies. He cannot believe that she truly suspects him. In any case, the fact remains, someone did it, whether by accident or on purpose. Pete begins to be hounded by the press, all chasing the scandalous story about the boy's abduction and the court case against the hospital for compensation. Naturally, Miles has already worked his charm on journalist Kira Keenan. Pete can only hope he has the strength to get through it, but soon the article makes the front page. Maddie tells Ollie everything that is on her mind. Sometimes, the woman doubts that she and Pete are the best parents for Theo and David. The family court advisor briefs Pete and Maddie and advises them to attend parenting classes. Pete is left speechless. Miles has used his influence and his connections to convince everyone around them that Pete and Maddie are unfit to be Theo's parents. In the middle of the night, the couple are woken by their son's scream. Theo is being tormented by nightmares about a monster in his room. It all began after the Lamberts forced their way into their lives. Although Pete hates the idea, he still goes to the parenting classes. In all likelihood, though, it will not help much in court, because soon another article comes out, once again discrediting Pete. The Lamberts will do anything to destroy the reputation of their rivals in the fight for custody of Theo. Amid the scandalous articles and growing press attention, Pete is fired. He is desperate, with no idea how to find a way out of the situation. Maddie has already read the article, which says in Pete's name, that he does not feel any bond with David and does not see anything of himself in him. Pete had shared those thoughts with Miles earlier, before the Lamberts' true intentions came to light. Maddie cannot understand why Pete did not tell her this. He explains that he did not become attached to David right away and simply did not want to upset her. Maddie needs a few days alone to think everything through. Pete begs her not to push him away because that is exactly what Miles wants. But she cannot go on like this any longer. For the time being, Pete stays with his father. Trying to keep herself together, Maddie brings Theo to the Lamberts, in accordance with the court order. Miles says how sorry he is that Maddie has had to go through so much, alluding to her postnatal depression as described in Pete's book. Maddie, however, does not fall for the manipulation. Miles thinks he can get away with anything, but he will not be able to intimidate her. Meanwhile, Jen meets with Pete to support him. She advises her friend to dig up dirt on Miles, otherwise he will go on destroying their lives and will eventually get what he wants. Miles must have secrets, but if Pete wants to win, he will have to think outside the box. The first thing Pete does is gather every piece of information he can find on Miles, so that he can get to know his enemy properly. He is a successful architect and grew up in Glasgow. His parents supposedly died in a fire, yet Pete manages to find the contact details of a woman believed to be related to Miles, Edith Lambert. Pete calls her, but the moment the woman hears Miles's name, she hangs up at once. The man has no intention of giving up, so he travels to Scotland to meet her in person. He says nothing to Maddie, so she goes to see David alone. Pete quickly finds the cafe where Edith works. All he asks is that she hear him out, because this may be his only chance to learn the truth about Miles. Edith hesitates, but in the end she agrees to listen to Pete's story. Meanwhile, Miles asks Maddie why she has come alone, without Theo's father. Trying to keep herself under control, Maddie replies that Pete is at work. But Miles already knows that Pete has been fired, which is more than can be said for Maddie. Pete tells Edith about how the babies were switched at the maternity ward and how Miles is trying to get custody of both boys. Edith is Miles's mother, even though he previously claimed that his parents were dead. Edith would like to help, but she cannot, or is afraid to. To convince the woman, Pete shows her a photograph of Theo. In tears, she says that the boy looks just like David, her son who died in the fire. Pete says that Miles named the boy he is raising David. The man senses that Miles is somehow connected to the fire. Edith only says that he would be better off leaving. Pete leaves her a photo of David in case she changes her mind. When Pete returns, he tells Maddie everything, about the fire in which Miles's brother David died, about Miles's lies concerning the deaths of both his parents. Maddie does not understand how any of this is supposed to help them. If they want to gain custody of the boys, they have to be on their best behavior and not miss any meetings. Maddie felt humiliated having to make excuses to Miles. The fact that he is a liar is already obvious, so in Maddie's opinion, what Edith said will not change anything. When Miles learns that Pete has been digging into his past, he turns up right at John's house. By then Pete has already called Lambert's colleagues and clients. Miles strongly advises him to stay away. Pete, however, does not back down and says that he was in Scotland, where he met someone. For a brief moment Miles seems genuinely frightened, but the very next second he regains his composure. Maddie tries to juggle work with the constant need to take Theo to the Lamberts. But soon something terrible happens. Theo ends up in the hospital. In a rage, Miles shouts that the boy has once again gained access to medication because of the carelessness of the people who call themselves his parents. Neither Pete nor Maddie understands how this could have happened. Tomorrow the Lamberts will almost certainly destroy them in court. Pete is convinced that Miles deliberately poisoned Theo in order to completely crush the reputation of the boy's second family, but there is no proof. The next day the judge rules that since this is an unusual case requiring a more thorough investigation, the hearing will be postponed. Until then, however, Theo will be placed in the Lamberts' custody. Pete and Maddie will only be allowed to see Theo under supervision. Both boys will also work with psychologists to determine how being moved between families may affect them. Hearing this, Maddie cannot keep her emotions under control and walks out. She runs into Miles and accuses him of deliberately poisoning Theo. Miles mockingly tells her that she will never prove it anyway. He openly threatens the woman, which truly frightens her. But it also pushes Maddie to reunite with Pete. If they want to win, they have to stand together. For now, Miles has got what he wanted, both sons. Lucy smiles, but it is obvious that something else is on her mind. Pete and Maddie seize every opportunity to see Theo. All of their visits take place in the presence of a social worker. They are deeply upset when Theo says that his mother is Lucy and his father is Miles. Maddie does not understand how anyone could be so cruel. Why as a mother did Lucy allow this? Maddie remembers Miles saying that she is crazy, that her postnatal depression still has not gone away. Annika says outright that things look bad. Social services have prepared a report for the court stating that Theo should be placed fully in the Lamberts' custody. The day of the hearing arrives. Both sides will speak, on the basis of which the judge will make a decision. Pete, like Maddie, swears on the Bible to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Pete talks about how he gave up his career to care for his child, even though it was not an easy decision for him. The Lamberts' lawyer tries to use this to cast Maddie in a bad light, suggesting that she chose work over motherhood and did not give Theo enough attention. Remaining calm, Maddie explains that in a family one of the parents still has to work. These roles are distributed solely by agreement between two people. After her son was born, Maddie went through a difficult period, but she overcame it and became even stronger. She has never regretted anything, and Pete has always supported her. Then it is the Lamberts' turn to testify. Miles of course uses every card he has, pointing out that Pete is unemployed and in debt, that Maddie is mentally unstable, that Theo ended up in the hospital twice with poisoning. However, Miles loses all his confidence when his mother appears in the courtroom. After the hearing, he approaches her and demands that she get out of here. But Edith cannot allow her grandson's life to be destroyed, especially now that she has only recently learned of his existence. For Lucy, Edith's appearance comes as a complete shock, because she too had been certain that both of Miles's parents were dead. Edith warns Lucy, telling her that Miles is selfish and will do anything to get what he wants. Once Edith failed to protect David from his brother, and she will have to live with that for the rest of her days. Lucy cannot sleep, nor can Maddie. By tomorrow it will be decided who the boys will stay with. The life of everyone involved in this story may be changed forever. The hearing does not begin as planned. The court is shown a video that was sent anonymously to Child Protective Services. It is footage from a security camera in the Lamberts' house, showing Miles poisoning Theo. It takes a great deal of effort for him to keep his self-control. One of the nannies may have sent the video. For the first time Maddie and Pete feel hope, but they have not won yet. In light of this new information, the judge is not prepared to make a decision right away. Further investigation is necessary. Deliberate poisoning and shifting the blame onto another person is a very serious accusation. For now Theo will be returned to Maddie and Pete's custody, while David will remain in the Lamberts' house. The court also rules that until the investigation is complete, Miles must leave the house because he poses a potential threat to the boy. Lucy makes sure that all the cameras in the house are switched on. She is no less a hostage of Miles than Theo or David. The illusion of a perfect family is falling apart. Pete is overjoyed to have Theo back. They walk around town, but when Pete gets distracted buying some fries, the boy disappears. The man starts frantically searching for his son and asking passers-by whether they have seen a boy in a yellow jacket. One woman mentions that she saw the boy walking away with a tall bearded man. Pete tries to call Miles, but to no avail. Miles does however send him his location. Without a moment's delay, Pete heads there, to the shore, and sees Theo's yellow jacket in the sea. Miles watches it all with indifference. Pete dives in again and again, desperately trying to find his son. But Theo is nowhere to be found. Spotting Miles, Pete, already exhausted, asks where Theo is. Miles shouts that Theo is his son and is alone. He is not giving him up to anyone. Theo is safe and unharmed. This is how Miles wanted to show Pete what it feels like to lose a child. Pete hugs the boy through tears. Miles vows that Theo will stay with him, no matter the cost. Of course Pete and Maddie report the incident to the police. For the moment Miles cannot be arrested, since he is Theo's biological father. But this will clearly work against the Lamberts in court. Maddie decides to speak to Lucy one-on-one. Maddie feels that Lucy is afraid of Miles and is not acting of her own free will. Maddie's memories from the hospital are still very fresh. She remembers how Lucy went through hell when the boys were in intensive care. Miles was not there. Maddie realizes that it was Lucy who sent the video to Child Protective Services. Clearly terrified, she asks Maddie to just leave. Maddie in turn asks Lucy to think about their children's safety. Miles is a threat to them, so she needs to find the strength to leave him. The following morning, he shows up at the house in defiance of the court order. Lucy is terrified, but tries not to show it. She knows her husband is capable of anything. In the bathroom with the water running loudly, Lucy leaves Maddie a voice message, finally telling her the whole truth. After getting married, Lucy lived in fear the entire time. Miles hurts the people he loves. That is why in order to save her son, She deliberately switched the babies at the maternity ward. It was a moment of madness, but once Lucy realized what she had done, there was no way to undo it. Listening to the message, Maddie cries. Lucy swears that she loved and protected David as if he were her own son. But she can no longer keep the secret. Miles takes Lucy and David to the shore under the pretense of a picnic, but in reality he planned it so Lucy would confess that she was the one who sent the video to Child Protective Services. Miles accuses his wife of betrayal and of costing them their son. Meanwhile, Maddie tries to find Lucy, realizing that time is running out. Miles picks David up in his arms and walks to the edge of the cliff. Lucy begs her husband not to do anything stupid, promising that he, she, and Theo will be reunited very soon. But Miles does not need a treacherous wife any more than he needs someone else's child. At that moment, Maddie appears. In order to save David, Lucy pushes Miles off the cliff. Later, she asks Maddie whether she will ever be able to forgive her. Maddie understands that Lucy did it to protect her child. The women decide to keep both secrets. Lucy reports Miles missing to the police. 3 months later, Theo has stayed with Pete and Maddie, and David with Lucy. But all of them see each other every day.
The story opens on the set of a SIM card commercial. The man directing it is named Dan. Once shooting wraps, Dan tells his colleague Anna that he and his wife Lisa are heading up to the cabin this weekend. He mentions that Lisa is planning a big hike, going alone deep into the mountains, and that he keeps warning her it sounds dangerous. Dan climbs into his car and gets on the phone with a man. Dan had already arranged for this man to meet him the next day. Inside his car sit things like duct tape. Next, Dan stops by a retirement home and tells his father the exact same thing, that Lisa and he are going up to the cabin. His father asks if Lisa is still with him. It becomes clear the two men don't get along. His father is a war veteran, and he wishes a war upon Dan so his son will finally become a man like him. When Dan returns home, a woman greets him with the words, "Happy hunting." Dan calls out loudly to Lisa, asking if she's ready for some hiking. Lisa looks at him, confused, and asks what he's talking about. Halfway through the drive, the two of them start fighting in the car. Lisa is an actor and Dan is a director, and each one believes the other is terrible at their craft. Lisa snaps that he directed one film 8 years ago and now he only directs pop-up ads. They cut the argument short and agree to fake being happy for this one weekend. The cabin key sits right on top of the door. They step inside and start settling in. Dan heads down to the basement and see the shotgun stored there. Upstairs, while preparing steak, he asks Lisa about his blue sweater, which he can't seem to find. Dan tells Lisa not to crush the garlic but to slice it instead. He's trying to make the meal nice for her. Lisa fires back, asking him to be nice. The frustration he's been carrying is impossible to hide. The two of them sit down to eat by the lake. Dan reveals that he specially ordered peppercorns from Ohio. He wanted this meal to be truly special for her. Lisa looks puzzled. She asks why he'd go to that trouble. Steak isn't even her favorite food. Her favorite is ceviche, which Dan says he's never seen her order. Lisa explains she only orders it when the restaurant does it well, mostly Peruvian places. That comment hits Dan hard. He suddenly remembers a man from Lisa's acting class. That man happens to be from Peru. Lisa and this guy have been writing their own material together. Later that night, the two of them sit down to a game of Scrabble. The argument starts up all over again. Dan keeps winning by memorizing short Scrabble words. Lisa finally gives up and heads to bed. The next day, Dan starts collecting a bag of hard rocks from around the cabin. He carries the bag down to their boat and hides it inside. Then he goes to his car, pulls out the rest of his tools, and stashes them in the basement. He grabs a bottle of chloroform and heads upstairs. He pours it onto a cloth. After taking a swig of alcohol for courage, he moves toward Lisa with the soaked rag in his hand. But Lisa spins around and tastes him. Dan crashes to the floor, unconscious. When he finally comes to, he realizes Lisa has tied him to a chair. Lisa asks what's in the bottle. Dan tells her it's cleaning fluid for that window. Then she asks about the duct tape and the rocks sitting in the boat. Dan flips the question back on her. He asks why she has a taser. Lisa walks down to the basement and comes back up holding a shotgun. She levels it straight at him. His entire plan is now clear to her. He was going to kill her and sink her body at the bottom of the lake. But one thing still doesn't add up. She can't figure out what the saw was for. She raises the shotgun and demands the truth. Dan says bodies can float and resurface if you don't cut them up. Lisa is stunned. She tells him, "You were going to cut me? You can't even touch raw meat. And why do you want to kill me?" That's when Dan finally lays it out. He knows about Lisa and the man from Peru. He knows about the affair. He saw them together at a party because he was there too. Lisa hits back. She tells Dan he hasn't touched her in 2 years. Dan explodes. He shouts that all she ever does is criticize him. She makes him feel so small, like he's nothing. He wanted a wife, not to be married to his mother. Lisa fires right back. She wanted a man, not some 40-year-old toddler. She married him thinking he was 10 years older, that he'd be mature. But he's pathetic and his plan sucks. Her plan, on the other hand, is excellent. A day earlier, Lisa had already told their neighbor that Dan was going hunting, that it was so dangerous. There's also a man named Henry who'd been doing work around their place. Henry went to the same high school as Dan, and he also did time in prison. Dan helps him out by paying him to do chores. That's exactly why the woman had told Dan, "Happy hunting." And Lisa's plan is to stage it like Dan's gun safety wasn't on, and the weapon accidentally went off on him. Dan starts mocking her. Her big plan is just to shoot him, while he prepared a nice meal for her. At least with his plan she wouldn't have felt a thing while dying, because she'd already be unconscious. Dan tells her whatever she's planning is never going to work. She's a horrible actress. The cops will never believe her story. Then he starts demonstrating how he would act it out himself. The two of them slip into a full-on acting competition, trying to prove who can sell the performance better. Dan manages to squeeze a tear out of his eye first. Lisa snaps and attacks him with the back of the gun. But right at that moment, Henry walks in from behind, hammer in hand. Dan says, "It's hammer time." Henry just stands there, missing the cue to strike Lisa. Dan has to spell it out for him and tell him plainly to hit her. Dan had actually set this entire plan with Henry 5 days earlier. Henry would cut Lisa into pieces for him. Lisa was insured for $100,000, and Henry was getting half. They tie Lisa to a chair in the basement. Lisa tells Dan she always knew he didn't have the guts to do something like this himself. But Dan turns the question on her. He asks why she wants him dead. Lisa unloads on him. He's controlling, weak, and insecure. He pushed her to quit her job to focus on acting, and then didn't even give her a tiny role in his own movie. He lost all of their money. Even a divorce wouldn't free her from the debt he buried them in. She's killing him for the insurance money. From behind, Henry chimes in. He says they're killing her for the exact same reason, and that he's getting half, $50,000. Lisa starts to say something, but Dan covers her mouth with a sheet of polythene and cuts off her breathing. Henry quickly raises his gun on Dan and tells him to let her talk. Lisa drops the bomb. The policy is for $1 million. Dan lied to him. Right there, Lisa offers Henry $500,000 to switch sides. Dan counters with $750,000. Lisa says she'll give him all of it. Dan lunges at Henry. The two of them grapple for the gun. The weapon slips and lands on the floor right between Lisa and Dan. They start spitting on each other in pure rage. And in the middle of that chaos, the gun goes off and the bullet hits Henry. Henry is now dead. Lisa and Dan immediately start blaming each other. The argument ends with the gun in Dan's hands. Lisa bolts upstairs. Dan limps after her, but the shotgun is empty now. He swings at her with the back of it. Lisa stabs his foot with a knife. She gets her hand on the gun and runs further upstairs to reload it. But in their next scuffle, the gun goes off and the shot rips straight into the ceiling. And from the attic above, 3 people come crashing down. The impact knocks both Lisa and Dan unconscious. These 3 are 2 escaped prisoners and 1 correctional officer. They had broken out of prison 3 days earlier and made their way to the cabin. They found the key sitting on top of the door easily enough. The prisoners are convicted killers. Officer Allegra has been having an affair with the prisoner Peter. They had even put on Dan's clothes. But then Dan and Lisa showed up. The 3 of them quickly hid up in the attic. Peter grabbed some supplies from below before climbing up. They decided to lay low, because killing the couple could bring more people to the cabin. Out of pure boredom, they started playing charades up there. From the attic, they also watched Henry walk into the house. And a little earlier, the bullet that Lisa and Dan fired into the ceiling had gone straight into Todd's butt. That's what sent all three of them crashing down. Now they lock Dan and Lisa in the basement. They compliment Dan on the steak he made. Then the three of them introduce themselves. They start calling Dan and Lisa by the names Ron and Hermione. Peter tells the couple that he and Todd were wards of the state. Allegra cuts him off and tells him to tell the story properly. She explains that she helped him escape because they're in love. Peter reluctantly agrees. Peter demands cash from Dan and Lisa. They've already checked Dan's wallet and found only $53. Lisa offers them another $200. Peter tells her they need a lot more than that. But Dan and Lisa are broke. The two of them start arguing all over again. Allegra steps in and says she'll handle them. She tells Todd to draw a circle. Then Allegra tells them about a game all the guards used to play in the prison to kill the boredom. They would drag prisoners out of their cells into the laundry room, draw a circle in the middle, and make them fight inside it. Now Todd and Dan are going to play this game. And if Dan doesn't want to play, he has to tell them where the money is. Dan says they don't have any money, but he offers to come up with another solution. Todd attacks Dan. Dan slips out and leaves the circle. The three of them team up and pin Dan down on the pool table. Right then, Peter's eyes land on a movie poster. It's a film Dan had directed. Peter says he loves that movie. He's seen it multiple times in prison. They start talking about it, but the game resumes. Allegra raises her gun at Dan and tells him to open his eyes and say goodbye to his wife. That's when Lisa cuts in. She tells them to stop. She has money. She has 50 grand sitting in a bank. They can have it the moment the bank opens. So for the night, the two of them are tied up together. Lisa turns to Dan and asks how they ended up here. She tells him she was so in love with him once. She even apologizes for the affair with the Peru guy. Maybe, she says, she wanted to get caught. She wanted Dan to fight for them, but now they're both about to die. Upstairs, Peter lays out the plan. They'll force the couple to withdraw the money from the bank, kill them, find a spot to ditch the car. Allegra disagrees. That car has been nothing but helpful in their escape, and they shouldn't ditch it. Back downstairs, Dan spots a pool ball. He kicks it closer to himself. Then he starts shouting at the top of his lungs. Peter sends Todd down to deal with it. Dan tells him he has to go to the bathroom. Todd checks with Peter first, then unties Dan with a warning. Before letting him in, Todd steps into the bathroom and pulls the entire lid off the toilet tank. Once Dan is in there, Todd walks over to Lisa and starts harassing her. When Todd hears the flush, he heads toward the bathroom. That's where Dan knocks him out cold using the pool ball stuffed inside a sock. Dan drops Todd's knife near Lisa and heads upstairs alone. Lisa uses the knife to cut herself free. From upstairs, Peter starts calling out to Todd. He comes down and brings him back to consciousness. Lisa runs out of the house. The others come outside to look for her. They head deeper into the woods searching for her. Lisa gets into the car, but she can't find the keys. Then Todd's flashlight dies on him. He walks back into the house and stumbles right onto Lisa. Todd is going to kill her because they hit him in the head. But right then, Dan starts moving toward them from behind. Lisa quickly tells Todd that she's pregnant. She says she hadn't mentioned it before because the baby isn't her husband's. She breaks down crying, begging him not to kill her baby. From behind, Dan launches at Todd. But Todd is much stronger than him. Lisa jumps in and bites Todd's ear clean off. Todd overpowers them both. Lisa pours a cleaning liquid into his eyes and smashes a jar over his head. But Todd gets right back up and throws Lisa onto a table. He starts strangling her with a wire. Dan finally comes to. He goes for the gun but slips on his way to it. Todd starts pounding on him. Lisa grabs a handful of knives and stabs Todd. After 3 stabs, Todd finally turns toward her. From behind, Dan rams a trophy straight into his head. But Todd still keeps walking toward him. He drops dead while muttering the word, Dumbledore. Hearing the others coming back from outside, Dan and Lisa sprint upstairs. They hide inside a closet. Dan breaks down. He tells Lisa this is all his fault. He didn't fight for them. The moment things started falling apart, he got scared. He just gave up. The two of them start crying. Dan hands Lisa the boat keys and tells her to run, since she's pregnant. But Lisa stops him. That was a lie. Dan looks at her and tells her that was the best acting he's ever seen. But by now, Peter has made it there. Dan lunges at him. Lisa runs outside. But Allegra grabs Lisa. Dan rushes out and shoves Allegra to the ground. From above, Peter jumps down right onto Dan and Lisa. He starts beating on Dan. Lisa swings a garden rake straight into Peter. Then Todd appears behind Lisa, still alive somehow. He presses a knife to her throat. Peter rips the rake out of his own body. He drags Dan forward and stabs him through the hand. As he does, he starts talking about his past murders. He's never shoved anyone's face into a lawnmower before. He's about to fix that with Dan. The lawnmower tears Dan's fingers off. His face is next. Then a car comes flying out of nowhere and slams into Peter. The driver is Dan's father. 6 hours earlier, a man spotted the broken cabin window and called Dan's father, Michael, about it. The retirement home nurse had told Michael to head back to his room. So Michael beat him down and took his car keys. He drove that car straight to the cabin, and now he's just plowed it into Peter. Allegra drops the gun and runs to Peter. Michael grabs the gun and blows Todd's head off. He turns on Peter next, but Allegra stabs him from behind. Michael shoots her in the feet. When Peter comes closer, Michael bites Peter's nose. Peter swings back at him. Michael yells at Dan to run. Lisa and Dan jump into the car and try to escape, but the engine cuts out. And right then, Peter throws Dan's dad onto the lawnmower, killing him. Dan and Lisa finally get the car started and tear off. But Peter opens fire on them, and they crash into a tree. Dan shakes Lisa awake. The bullet had grazed her hair. He tells her, "I need you to get to the boat." He has something else to take care of himself. Back near the wreckage, Allegra is screaming in pain in front of Peter, but he doesn't lift a finger to help her. He breaks up with her right then and walks over to the car, which is now empty. Lisa is sprinting toward the boat. Allegra drags herself back inside the house to try to piece her feet back together. But that's when Dan walks in with the gun. He levels it at her and demands his sweater back. Allegra cries out that she was being brainwashed. She's a cop. He's not going to kill a cop. Dan shoots her mouth off. Out on the water, Lisa has reached the boat. But no matter how many times she turns it on, it won't start. And that's when Peter arrives. That's when Dan hears Lisa screaming. He sprints toward her. Peter is already pulling away with Lisa on the boat. Dan grabs hold of a rope trailing from the back of the boat and starts pulling himself toward it. Lisa spots him and keeps Peter talking, so he won't turn around. Dan climbs up and attacks Peter. Peter immediately grabs Dan's injured hand and starts crushing it. Lisa swings a flare at Peter, but she misses. Peter looks at Dan and tells him he's going to kill his wife now, which is something Dan couldn't even do himself. Dan tells him to get away from his wife, but suddenly he starts vomiting. He punches Peter. Peter strangles him with a rope around the neck. Lisa drops the bag of rocks around Peter's neck. The two of them shove Peter into the water. Peter tries to swim, but the weight drags him under. He drowns. But Dan is caught in a rope and gets pulled down with him. Lisa holds on to him. This is the perfect moment for Lisa to kill Dan. But she doesn't. She pulls him back up onto the boat. The two of them survive it all and sit together at the edge of the lake. Lisa finds his severed fingers. But they still have a mountain of problems waiting for them, and they're still broke. Lisa tells him they'll deal with it. She has an idea. The two of them act their hearts out in front of the police and the media, selling the story of how these escaped prisoners attacked them. The story makes them famous overnight. A movie gets made out of their survival. Lisa stars in it. A few changes are made to spice it up for the screen. And Dan directs it. And that's where the story ends. Let us know in the comments how you liked this explanation. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.